Hey guys, and welcome to episode 140 of the OCDStories.com podcast. Now in this episode, I got on Kevin Putman to share his OCD story with us. Kevin won the IOCDF's Hero Award in 2015 for his work with Run OCD, which was his initiative about advocacy and raising awareness for OCD. As part of Run OCD, he used to run ping pong tournaments called Ping Pong for OCD. And if you used to go back in the day to the IOCDF conferences, you would have seen one of those. So in this, Kevin shares his OCD story, his sort of recovery journey. He goes into a lot of detail, which is really good. It was a really interesting story. We talk about his kind of biggest epiphany, any roadblocks, any lifestyle changes. We talk about, parenting while having OCD, sort of advice for parents. Then we go into Run OCD, his initiative. We talk about Ping Pong for OCD. And then obviously the general questions at the end. But Kevin shares so much information in here. It's a long episode, but it's a good one. So I encourage you to listen all the way through. So without further ado, here is Kevin. On the podcast today, I have Kevin Putman. Kevin is known for his advocacy work with Run OCD, a grassroots movement motivated to educate, support and raise awareness about obsessive compulsive disorder. As part of this, Kevin ran a ping pong tournament called Ping Pong for OCD at the IOCDF conferences and other events. In 2015, he won the Hero Award for the IOCDF. Welcome to the show, Kevin. It was 2015, wasn't it?
It was 2015.
Okay,
yep, we
good.
Figured that out.
I saw you looking then. So
I did look. I'm holding the trophy.
I was like, I've done that thing again where I was listening, but I wasn't actually listening and I wrote the wrong date.
Right.
Cool. All right, but yeah, good to have you on.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So, obviously, for those listening to the show, I got to meet you at the conference this year, in 2018, at Washington, for our mutual friends, Chrissy and Margaret. So yeah, it was a pleasure to get to know you there. So I wanted to kind of share your wisdom with the world and your story.
Try my best.
Okay, good. So yeah, so on that then, it'd be good to hear your OCD story in as little or as much detail as you want to give.
Yeah, definitely. So my OCD story, I guess I'll just start when I was younger. So I was like, my first OCD memory was when I was 10 years old, and I was getting ready to go on a camping trip. And before I went on this camping trip, I was trying on my socks, and I was put the sock on my left foot, I would put it on my right foot, and one of the things that I have just right OCD. So I do something until it feels just right. Obviously at 10 years old, I didn't know that, but I was trying these socks on to figure out which sock felt right on which foot. And then I had a black Sharpie and I would mark the sock, like this sock goes on my left foot, this sock goes on my right foot, And so at the time it was just something that was just, kind of funny and something that Kevin did. And a lot of, growing up, like tons of anxiety, a lot of checking, ovens and lights and that kind of stuff, always late to go places because I was either checking or taking a half an hour shower until it felt just right, that kind of stuff. But I was not diagnosed, or I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't know. I just thought it was kind of like who I was and what I did. And then it wasn't until I got into college and I took a psychology 101 class, and I was sitting there and they were just talking about, anxiety disorders. And then the, part of the lecture on that day happened to be on OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. And so I sat there in the back of that class. Actually, I was sitting in the front. I shouldn't lie to you. I was a front seat college guy. Yeah. And so I'm sitting there and I'm taking my notes, and it was like somebody was just punching me in the stomach. Every time I was taking the notes, they were like, folks who have OCD exhibit it in this way, and they do this and they do that. And I'm just like, oh my gosh,
that's me.
That's me. Yeah. It just related so closely and so much. I even wrote, and I can't find this, and I'm so frustrated about it, but you had to write like a essay about one of the disorders. And I actually wrote it about OCD, and then I used myself as the examples of, turning the lights on and off before I went to bed, and touching certain things before that happened. But it's still at that point, like, even though I realized it, I wasn't at the point where I felt like it was, like, I wasn't in treatment, I wasn't in counseling, I wasn't taking medication. I was just kind of still doing my thing, living my life. I got into college, and when I went into college, so that was at a community college. So then I went off to school, and I just went in blind with a roommate. And this was the first time in my life that I was living outside of my house, away from my parents. And, when you're living in a family, people just kind of do what they do, and you're just so used to it. It's not a big deal. But I'm living with this guy who, I just met him just because he was my roommate. And he was the one that kind of started asking me questions like, why are you in the bathroom so long? Why are you running the water so long? Why are you? And now I don't have contamination OCD. So the reason why I would be taking long showers or running the water for a long time was for just right reasons, or for symmetry type reasons, washing this way and washing that way, or doing things until it felt just right. And so he was the one that really started to ask kind of a lot of questions. And that's when I started to realize, okay, there might be something here. But still at that point, it wasn't, it was a lot of anxiety, but I was able to kind of get through my days. I knew that it was going to take me extra long to take a shower, or I knew it was going to take me extra long to do the things that I was doing. So then I met my wife, and we moved in together, and she started asking more questions and, watching the things that I was doing. And she was the one that really said the word OCD to me, and until I had that class. So there was probably like 4 or 5 years between the time that I had the class until I was living with my wife. And she was the one that basically said, Kevin, I think you have OCD. And I grew up in an environment with my family that was very rigid. I don't want to diagnose anybody and say that my parents had OCD, but my dad is a very routine-based person. He eats, for breakfast, he has a routine of he eats this, Tuesdays and oatmeal, and Wednesdays he has waffles. This day he wears blue, and on this day he wears green, kind of a thing. And they both live like a very routine life. And whenever I would get, anxious, but at the time I didn't really know it was anxious, and I would, talk with my mom, she would say, oh, you're going to be fine. You just need to establish your routine. You just need to figure this out, almost like taking comfort in the rituals of what is the OCD. So that was kind of tough. And so then my wife said, I really think there's something here. And so at that point, I started reaching out and looking for some treatment. But living in the small town that I live in Michigan here, there was not anybody who pretty much knew. I don't want to say there wasn't anybody that knew what they were talking about.
Anyone that you could find.
I guess I should say that. Because I saw all sorts of counselors, and I was doing like what they were telling me to do, and it just didn't seem to be working. So what was happening is it was increasingly getting worse. And so the checking was just like constant. The symmetry was getting constant. The just right was getting constant. At the time, I was working at a school, and the school had a camera system in the school. All right. And so I would think that because I have over responsibility as well, so I'm just, everyone's going to die at the end if I don't do whatever. So I would think that I would see something at the school. And so I would write down the time that I thought that I saw it happening. And then after school, I would go through and I would have this big long list of like timestamps, 1:27 and at 2:14 or at 10:13 in the morning. And so I would sit in my office and I would go through with these timestamps and I was checking on the cameras, looking for what I thought I saw at that time of the day.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was getting to the point where I was there. I mean, school got out at 3 and I was coming home at 7 o'clock at night, or I lived so close to the school that I would finally get home and then I would have to go back. I mean, I can remember just sitting at dinner with my family and just immediately just standing up and getting in my car and just leaving and going back down to the school because I needed to check X, whatever that was. And then I ran the after school program at this school, so I was the last person to leave. So not only was I doing these camera checks, but then it was on me to lock up the entire school, make sure of course you had to make sure that the windows were closed and you had to make sure that all the doors were locked. And so then I'm, after 4 hours of checking cameras that looking for nothing, then I spent another hour or 2 or 3 or however long it was going around the school, doing that kind of thing. So that was really, I mean, when it started to get really bad, this was like 2008, 2009, when things were really, and then that was kind of manifesting itself at home as well, with just kind of your quintessential checking and over responsibility as far as like walking down the street and seeing a rock and thinking, oh man, I got to move that rock, because if I don't move that rock, then
someone's
the
going
next
to
person trip, they're going to fall into the street, and then the car's going to come and they're going to hit them, and then that car's going to hit the house, and the house is going to start on fire, and next thing you know, the world as we know it has ended because of the rock. Yeah. And then a lot of like symmetry type behaviors, like with my clothing. It would take me a long time to put my clothing on. Like if I put a t-shirt on, I had to put it like particularly right over my head, and it had to hit my head on both exact spots, and then hit my ears on both exact spots. And if that didn't work, then I would take that shirt and I would throw it in the laundry. And so then, you have this, you're going through 8 t-shirts a morning, which obviously takes up time with laundry. And, so it was getting bad. It was getting real. So I don't know, like, if you want me to keep going on this.
Well, if you want, I got a couple of questions and then we can continue.
That's kind of just lead up to, where I was before I ended up going into treatment, basically. I mean, the end of the story there is that I was completely overcome. When it was all said and done, I was completely overcome with the OCD. I didn't want to move right because I knew I was going to have to move left and right and left and right and left and right until it felt right. I didn't want to turn anything on because I was going to have to turn it off. I was so scared to leave my house and to do anything, because anything that I was going to do was the world was going to end, because either I did or I did not do it. And then I had, at the time, my family and my kids were young, and so I had OCD wrapped up around the kids. And, were they going to die in their sleep? And so I'm waking them up and making sure they're alive. And I was basically like, then the anxiety, the panic attacks, the depression, and it just got to the point where I was like non-functional. I was just on the couch, hiding under a sleeping bag, I couldn't do anything. I just was doing nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, just because I was just one big ball of panic, anxiety, depression, and the weight of OCD laying over me like none other.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that in a lot of detail. I think the way you went into how logical your thoughts were, for example, with the rock and how it just progressed. Obviously, it's when in hindsight it's completely crazy, but it's actually a logical thought process when you think about each next step, and that's, I guess, why OCD can be believable as well.
Right.
But so I got a couple of questions. So around the Psychology 101 class, I mean, I've heard this so many times where people have been in a psychology class and OCD's come up, and that's been the moment they've realized that, hey,
Really?
this is me. So I think professors need to be ready to step in. If anyone's had any epiphanies during these classes, come and speak to me. I'm not sure if they do that, but yeah. So I guess that happened, and you kind of thought, this is me. But then when your wife mentioned it 4 or 5 years later was when maybe you took it a bit more seriously. I use the word seriously, but I guess, yeah, why didn't you try and, I don't know, like, seek help or therapy at that point?
At that time, it wasn't a huge, I didn't think it was a huge piece of me or a piece of my life.
Yeah.
I was probably 19 years old. I was living at home with my parents, and I was just kind of living my life for me. Yeah. I didn't have anybody who was really paying attention to what I was doing, and I could get through. I was still going to work. I was still taking care of the things that I needed to take care of. And so it wasn't until with my wife and then my kids that I was, spending a ton of time and energy. And, I did a lot of mental compulsions as well. So then there I would be like, even once I got done, like checking a door, for instance, then I was like doing this mental compulsion of like watching the video in my head of me going and locking the door to like double check, make sure, even though I just checked it for 2 hours straight, then I got another 2 hours when I got home just sitting in the chair.
Yeah.
And so my wife, she needed me. I mean, we had young kids, we had a young family, we were both in school, and it was like, all right, Kevin, this is a team, parenting, being a family guy, this is a team sport, we need you here. And I wasn't there because I was so involved in myself, and I was so overcome with the I was sick. I was just so sick. What's going on?
Yeah. No, thanks for that. And with like the CCTV, so the video recordings where you're going back and using your timestamps to check, because you said you were spending like up to a few hours after school, and then sometimes going back. Were you honest with your wife, or were you kind of trying to cover up why you were going back?
Oh no, she knew.
Oh,
she knew what was going on. Yeah, very much so. I mean, she has been my number one supporter, my rock, my everything since I met her. But she is the reason why I'm here right now. So our relationship is open, and she knew what was going on. I mean, because I was dealing with a ton of panic as well. So I was calling her on the phone 5 to 10 times a day. Like I'd be in the bathroom crying, having a panic attack, just not even able to, like she would just talk me out of the bathroom at work into being able to go to work because she wasn't working at the time. So I was, doing the money and the health insurance and all that kind of stuff. So we needed me to be at that job doing that for that time. I mean, obviously, and the question then becomes, kind of the chicken or the egg question. Like, is it the job that's causing the anxiety, or is it the anxiety that's making the job harder? But I mean, I have probably overshared with my wife. I mean, she knows everything that's been going on. So there was never a point of hiding it. I mean, she was in my corner from day one, helping me through step by step.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. And obviously kudos to her.
I'm so lucky.
Yeah.
I'm so lucky. Because I know a lot of people, like when I would go to the conferences or I would go to a support group or read a book, I mean, it's people who, they didn't have that support. They were trying to hide. They were trying to pretend like there's nothing wrong. And I mean, there was no way I could have done it. I mean, I was so sick and so involved in the OCD and the depression, the anxiety and everything. But I don't know how people do it where you're trying to trying to hide it from somebody. There was no hiding for me.
No, yeah, well, that's great to hear you had that support. And yeah, absolutely, right. It's called the secret illness for a reason. People cover it up because they don't want to look insane or whatever word or yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I had gotten to the point where it just didn't even matter to me.
Yeah.
You know, like sometimes if you're going to go back and check a lock or an oven or do some type of symmetry or something, like around certain people, you try to be slick about it. You know what I mean? And I was so sick that I just did not even care.
Yeah.
Like I would have stood in front of a group of 100 people and checked that lock for an hour because I just had to do it. I was that sick.
Oh. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, you don't often hear it explained like that, but you're right. When you just need that certainty, that answer, I guess you don't or won't care what anyone thinks.
No, for a while I did, and then I was just like, I just have to do this to get through what I need to get through. It doesn't matter to me who's watching or who's there. Yeah. No, I didn't like it.
No,
obviously I didn't want to, but I felt like I had to because if I didn't, then something terrible would happen, or I would just be so full of anxiety and panic that it would be worth checking a lock in front of a group of people.
Yeah. No,
for example.
it makes sense. Cool. All right. So let's go on to then, I guess, how you started to turn it around, and I guess you call it your recovery story.
Yeah. All right. It was April 2010, and I had gotten to the point where I was on the couch. I was under the sleeping bag. I was not engaged. I was non-functional, and I was so depressed and I was so anxious that I was suicidal at that time too. And here in Michigan, we have what we call the Lower Peninsula and the Upper Peninsula, and there's the Straits of Mackinac, which is where a couple of the Great Lakes come together, and there's a big suspension bridge that connects the two peninsulas. And my plan was to drive up to the Mackinac Bridge and stop in the middle and jump off and have it be, I was done. I could not live my life this way, and there was no other, that was it. And so instead of doing that, my wife put me on a plane, and we flew to Houston, Texas, and I was enrolled or signed up, whatever, dropped off, however you want to say it, with the Houston OCD program.
Yeah. And
those guys saved my life. For sure. I mean, I was at a crossroads. It was like I was getting in the car, and either I was going to the airport to Houston or I was going to jump off the Mackinac Bridge. Yeah. And my wife put me on the plane, took me there, and it worked, which was awesome.
Awesome. Wow. Sorry,
really glad to be.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I'm glad you didn't jump.
I'm glad I didn't jump.
Good. All right. So tell us a bit about the Houston OCD program. What type of stuff did you end up doing, and any kind of epiphanies you had during that time?
Yeah. So for me, I think one of the really cool parts about the Houston OCD program was I was able to basically get plucked out of my reality and put into a total counter opposite reality. So like at the time, I'm 30 years old. I had 2 young daughters. I think they were maybe 3 and 6 or something. I was working full time. I was doing the family thing. I was doing the dad thing. I mean, before I was too non-functional to do anything. And so along with that, I was trying to go to therapy, and I was seeing these counselors, but the counselors were not treating OCD the way that it needed to be treated. A lot of them were, let's do some journaling, and let's do some, read a book. Or a lot of times I would go to the counselor, and all they would do is just offer me reassurance for an hour. I'd walk in and I'd be like, oh, I'm anxious about this. And I'd be like, oh, don't worry about that. Like try to rationally explain why the door is locked or why, you feel how you feel when you put a t-shirt on incorrectly, quote unquote. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so and that's what really drove me to the point where I was going to counseling. I was seeing my counselors once a week, and I was doing everything that they were telling me to do, and I wasn't getting better. But the problem was the counselors were telling me to do the wrong stuff. I had never heard the word ERP until I walked into the Houston OCD program. And at that point, I had been in some sort of counseling or some sort of treatment for a year or two at that point. So I'm like, what the heck? I'm seeing these mental health professionals. I'm doing what they're telling me to do. I'm kind of OCD about my OCD treatment.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was not the correct treatment that I needed. So when I got to Houston, it was super scary and it was super hard because I was like, okay, I'm away from my family. I'm away from my kids. I'm away from everything that I know. But at the same time, it was really nice because the only thing that I had to do was get better. All I had to do was focus on Kevin. And I was going from Michigan, which at that point in the year was like gray and cold and wet and snowy. And then here I was in Houston, Texas, and it was warm and it was nice and you could go outside and you could take a walk. And so I think, there was a lot of factors that came into it, but just the fact that I was like, okay, it was like I wasn't on vacation, but it was really nice. It was nice to have it be warm. It was nice to have it be sunny. It was nice to be in a place that I was just focused on Kevin, and it was all about me. And I didn't have to be a dad, and I didn't have to be a teacher, and I didn't have to take care of a dog or a fish or a cat or any of that kind of stuff, which is what I was doing. It was just Kevin. And the health professionals and the counselors and everybody there. I should try to say his name. I say it so terrible. Thruster Bjork Vincent. You think I know is the director of the Houston OCD program, Dr. Bjork Vincent from Iceland. And it's such a great place.
Yeah.
I learned about mindfulness. I never knew anything about mindfulness. ERP, I had never done ERP before, so we immediately start working on ERP. I know one of the big things that I had going on before I went into treatment was reading. So when I would read something, I would read it and I would reread it and I would reread it and I reread it, and I had gotten to the point that I was avoiding reading. So I had chosen that in my life, I was never going to read anything ever again. Well, I'm a teacher. So I tried to not read emails, not read.
Oh, wow.
So I had avoided reading. And so that was one of the things that we started working on. I got an OCD workbook and I got a book to read. And it was really nice to have that be a part of it, because bringing the reading piece back into my life, it just really helped in a ton of ways. Just think of every time that you read something in a day, and trying to avoid that. Or if you did read something, then you would be fixed on it. Like even your T-shirt, like where it says London, I would just be like London, 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 just constantly.
That's true. Yeah. Any like watching Netflix, you get all the titles of the shows. So yeah, you're right. There's so many words everywhere that you'd be triggered everywhere all the time.
So it was just like everywhere I looked. I can remember being at the post office one time and I just about passed out because they had a thing about this new stamp that they had, and it was like something new stamp, and I'm waiting in line to mail this package, and I'm just reading it and reading it and reading it, and it was just. Anyways, that was a little. What do they call that? A bird walk or something, where you just go off onto a little tangent on something.
I've never heard that expression.
So I think Houston was fresh, it was new,
Yeah.
it was different. It was exactly what I needed. Environmentally, I mean, it was set up at the time. They have a new building now, but at the time it was just this big house in a neighborhood. And so I moved in, and there used to be a show on MTV called The Real World. I
Yeah.
don't know, I might be dating myself here, but where they would just pick a bunch of random people and they put them in a house to live there, and they would just kind of see what happens. And when I moved in, it felt like the real world for OCD. I mean, I moved in and I was like, holy crap, there's like a whole bunch of people living here. Not a whole bunch, there's probably like 6 or 8 people, and we all had OCD. And it was, again, it was the first time that I was getting to know someone else that had what I had and understood. And so we were like living together. We were doing our therapy together. We had 24-hour people there helping us, doing therapy. You had a counselor there doing therapy with you. They were taking you out in the community, helping me with my ERP. It was just like this all-inclusive, like I walked in and someone just wrapped their arms around me and was like, okay, Kevin, we got you. If you do what we tell you to do, you're going to get better. And we're going to take care of you every step of the way. I mean, someone was cooking all the food. Like, I was the cook at our house, so I had to cook all the food. And here I was. It was a sweet house too, this big fancy house in this cool neighborhood in Houston, Texas. And someone was cooking, and I mean, totally taking care of me. And at that point in my life, that's what I needed. I needed someone to just like hold me and not only tell me it's going to be okay, which they wouldn't do that at all because they're not going to reassure you that way, but to really help you and to know what they're doing. I mean, all right, we're doing mindfulness and this is why we're doing this. We're doing thought records and this is why we're doing this. We're doing ERP and this is why we're doing this. I mean, it was just so different, but I was so hungry to get better that I was all in, and it worked.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm just making notes on it. I think that's so important what you just said about them doing something, but having the rationale of why they're doing it for OCD. Because like you said, that there's maybe nothing wrong with what those other counselors were doing for you before Houston, but they didn't understand maybe why they were doing it in the case of OCD, and that's where the disconnect was. And obviously they didn't do ERP, but no, that's great, and high praise for the Houston OCD program there.
Oh, I cannot say enough great things about them and what they've done. And so really it was my wife that found the Houston OCD program, and she first had found McLean and or McLean.
I think it's McLean,
but
it's spelled McLean, isn't it?
They're in Boston, right?
Yeah.
And they were full. So at the first that was our first choice. I was going to go there, and then they said no, we're full. And then Houston said, yeah, come on down. And nice. I'm so glad. It really worked out for me. I cannot say enough great things about them. I really can't.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. And I'm glad you got the help you needed. And Boston probably wouldn't have been as sunny as Houston. So
yeah, not at that point. You know, I mean, I just look back on it now, and it's like, of course, at that time of the year, I mean, there's just so many little things. Like I'm the type of person that believes in everything happens for a reason, and you know, life's full of a bunch of little miracles. You just got to pay attention to it, and it's always happening, you know. Yeah. And it's just when I look back on it and I see how it all kind of fell into place. Somebody was guiding that and making sure that I was there and I was doing what I needed to do. It definitely wasn't my time yet.
No, that's awesome, man. And how long were you in Houston for that program?
I was there for 2 months.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Spent 2 months there. And then, so I did come home. I was working on a lot of stuff there, obviously. And I came home for about a week to to work on some things. And then I went back for a couple more weeks. So, but it was cumulatively, it was 2 months.
Okay. And then,
because
so go on.
Well, I was just thinking of at the time when I was going in there, I had a lot of, I was taking a lot of medication, because I was doing that whole deal too. And I still take meds, but I finally found something that worked. But at the time, I was just kind of like a trial and error sort of thing. So I was taking a lot of meds, and my kids were young. And so I had a lot of fear about that I was going to drop a pill on the floor, and then one of my kids was going to find the pill, and they were going to take it, and they were going to die. And so we were doing a lot of ERP involving pills and kids. And so basically I flew back home to get in the real environment. It's hard to do ERP around your own kids when your kids aren't there. So I got to come home and spend some time, which was sort of weird because it's like, yay, dad's home, but he's like super anxious because the reason why he's here is to, drop pills on the floor and hope that you don't pick them up and die, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. That makes sense.
Uh-huh.
Okay. No, that's good to hear. And after you left the program officially, did you continue sort of any kind of Skype sessions with them or anything like that? Just touching base.
We didn't do Skype sessions, but I did have some phone calls.
Yeah.
And it was neat because, like, let's see, I went in April, May. Yeah, I went in April and May, and then the OCD conference was happening in July.
Yeah.
So my original plan was, I knew I wanted to go into an inpatient treatment. It was getting to that point. So I had already signed up to go to the IOCDF conference in Washington, D.C., which would have been in 2010, the first conference that I went to. And so our plan, my wife and I, our plan was to go there and to find the treatment center that I was going to go to, because they have the exhibitors hall and you can talk with everybody and figure it all out. But unfortunately, fortunately, however it worked out, it became time that I needed to go before then. So when I discharged or left the Houston OCD program, I came home, and so I had a couple of weeks, and then I was going to see everybody again at the conference in Washington, D.C., which was super neat to, see Thruster and to see some of the doctors and some of the staff there. So I kind of had like, okay, I'm going, we'll talk on the phone a few times, but then I'm going to see everybody for an entire weekend. And not only did I get to see everybody for the entire weekend, but I mean, I think anyone who's ever been to the IOCDF conference and you go to your first conference, it's just this magical experience. And it was like a perfect shot in the arm for me. Like, okay, I'm out of treatment. I'm home for a couple of weeks, and then I'm going to DC. Not only at the time I was just excited to see everybody from Houston, but then, I mean, it's the IOCDF conference, and it was, sessions and meeting people and just support groups. And so that was a huge piece of the puzzle as well.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's kind of a loving kick up the arse, the conference, because it reminds you in a nice way what you need to be doing.
I call it the shot in the arm. I didn't go last year, and I realized how important it is that I need to go every year. It's just it's part of my treatment is to go to that conference and to be there.
Absolutely. And you get a vacation in a different city. So
and I've been to some really cool places. I've been to San Diego. I've been to Washington, D.C. a couple times, Chicago. I mean, yeah, it's always somewhere really cool. California, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is called the International OCD Foundation. So hopefully one day they come over to the UK and do one here.
Right?
That'd be cool.
I'm into that. I've been trying to tell them to come to Michigan too, but for whatever reason, they're not coming.
So maybe they should do Michigan first and then the UK.
I think they should do the UK first.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. No, yeah, well, hopefully they're listening. Although I'm not sure the UK charities will be pleased about that. So it's great to hear, that worked and that was effective for you. Is there anything you do now, kind of lifestyle wise, that helps you kind of just maintain mental well-being?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One more thought about Houston,
Okay,
which will kind of tie in, was when I was there, it was the first time I ever went to a support group for OCD. And it wasn't just a support group for the folks that were at the Houston OCD program. It was run by Dr. John Hart. I don't know if you got a chance to meet Dr. John Hart. He was in Washington, D.C. He's a great guy. So him and his wife at the time were running this support group, and it was held at the Houston OCD program, but it wasn't just the Houston OCD program support group. It was for the Houston area. And so that was powerful to me because, I mean, Houston's a big city. And so we'd have about 30 people sitting in this circle, and it was all walks of life, all colors, all shapes, all sizes, 14-year-olds to 70-year-olds, everybody talking about OCD. And I found that real powerful. And so when I was coming back home, I knew that there wasn't a support group here for me. And my counselor at the time, Dr. Carrie Brown, said, well, Kevin, I think this support group has been a huge piece for you. You're going to have to start one when you get home. And I thought, okay, all right. So long story short, I started a support group, and for the last couple of years, we had a nice support group going. It has since, the town is so small, it has since dwindled away, and it's something that's not happening right now. But for the first couple of years when I got out of treatment, it was a huge piece of the puzzle for me. As of right now, what I'm doing for OCD, mindfulness is huge for me. I really have latched onto that, and I like it because it's all that we have, is this present moment, and when you're an anxious person or just kind of a person in general, most times we're worried about what just happened or what's going to happen instead of what is happening right now. And I love mindfulness because it can be quick. It can be simple. I mean, you can just choose, like, all right, I'm going to brush my teeth mindfully right now, or I'm going to tie my shoes mindfully. You don't have to like sit in a room and light candles and, create this huge meditation ambiance to be mindful. It's just, it's there. And when you want to switch into it, it's something that can be there. And for me, one thing that's really helped me with my mindfulness is exercise. I have really, that's been huge for me. Like I was telling you, Stuart, today I was nervous about coming on the podcast. So this morning I went to yoga, I walked my dogs, then I went for a run, then I went for a swim. I mean, that was all this. Now I was lucky because I had the day off today, so I was able to do those things. But I try to do something physical at least once a day. Okay. And it really helps me get in that moment because this running thing is a new thing for me, and I'm just getting into it. But I mean, when you're running, it's kind of hard. Like, you're like, man, my knees hurt, my legs hurt, my back hurts, I'm tired, I'm sweating. I mean, I'm in that moment, or if I'm playing basketball, it's hard to let your mind drift onto something else if you're engaged in a full court game of playing some hoops.
Absolutely.
So that really works.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Exercises, especially sports like basketball, when I used to skateboard, always dragged me into the here and now. Like, I couldn't help but be pulled into this moment. Running I found harder recently, at least the last couple of years. But yoga works for me as well sometimes.
Yeah. The run for me is pretty cool, and I just realized this just now talking with you, Stuart.
Yeah.
Is because I'm training to run across the Mackinac Bridge on Labor Day. On Labor Day it's the one day a year you can either run or walk across the Mackinac Bridge, and I've been training. I'm getting ready to do it. It's like 4.3 miles across this bridge, but just talking with you and telling my story and remembering where I was and what that bridge had meant for me, and now on Labor Day, I'm going to run from one side to the other. I think
Nice.
it's going to mean a lot more.
Very
Now,
symbolic, yeah.
yeah, and I didn't know that till just now, so I'm glad that
Absolutely.
happened.
When's excuse my ignorance, when's Labor Day?
Oh, okay. September 3rd
Okay.
is Labor
Oh,
Day.
so not far now.
Yes, we got about 2 weeks.
Yeah. All right.
Getting,
Well, yeah, good luck with that.
yeah, thank you.
I think when this episode comes out, you would have done it. So well done for
Okay,
completing it.
thank you. I'll send you a picture.
Oh,
They take
awesome.
your
Yeah.
They take your picture at the end. So
Yeah, we can add it. We can add it to the show notes so people
awesome.
can see.
That'll be great.
All right, cool. No, yeah, that's good. And it's obviously going to be an emotional run, no doubt, but hopefully a happy one.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. So I just had an idea. I thought I wish I could have been there and I could have done a post-run interview with you. I don't think I can fork out for a flight right now.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so what was, I guess, two questions. So one is like an epiphany in treatment that you know someone said something to you that just made sense, or you saw OCD in a different way. And then the opposite question is, what was a roadblock you faced and how did you overcome it?
I think the epiphany would probably be humor. I had a roommate. I mean, because I was there for 2 months and people would come and go. Sometimes I would have a room all to myself. Sometimes I would have a roommate. And I had this roommate, and he was just really funny. And I just remember laughing and having that be so healing and such a good thing. And then the idea of laughing at OCD, because if you think about it, it's really funny, the things that people do. And and so him and I would kind of like talk through our rituals and talk through our compulsions and our obsessions and make jokes about them. And I know some people like I'm not making fun of OCD by any means. I'm not. It's not like a laughing matter, but I mean, we would tease a lot about that kind of stuff, and it just helped to lighten it up a little bit, because I mean it's super irrational, and I guess that's the hard part, because like most people understand that it's irrational, but yet the feeling is so
real, rational,
and so real that you have to engage in that. I know it makes me think of my good friend Riley Sisson, R.I.P. Riley Sisson, who passed a couple years ago, and we had a connection with the over-responsibility. And so him and I would always, we would call each other and we would talk about how, oh, I'm not sure if I turned off my oven or not, or I don't know. And we realized that at the end of this catastrophication, that's the word I'm looking for, we would catastrophize to the point that a fire would start. And the fire would always start, and then the world would end because the world was on fire. And so he would call me or I would call him, and I'd be like, man, I just left the house. I'm not sure if the oven is on or off, but once that fire starts, it's coming to Georgia and it's going to get you as well. And then he would call me, or I'd just get a text on my phone and it would be like a fire, like a picture of a fire, and it was just like helpful. Like, man, I'm not in this by myself. I'm in this with some really great people who are trying to help themselves or trying to help me, and it's okay to laugh about it.
Absolutely. Yes. It's like Riley helped you and you helped Riley, kind of each other see through like the madness of OCD effectively and see it for what it is.
Right. Like he'd send me a picture of the fire, and then I would know he's struggling. He's having a hard time at that point. But then I would call him or just send something back to him, or it was just helpful to know So I guess two pieces of the puzzle. One was just people having those connections of folks that understand and know what's going on. I mean, mental health professionals are great, but if you meet somebody, a friend or a family member that truly understands what's happening,
Yeah.
That was huge. And then just to be able to laugh about it, because it's really funny.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And there was a talk on that at the conference this year about kind of when's it okay to laugh and joke about OCD. And one of the times that most people agreed on was, among others with OCD. And actually, it's quite helpful to laugh about it sometimes. Yeah, and I completely agree. It helps me kind of wake up out of the insanity of it sometimes.
Right. Kind of like snap out of it a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
For lack of a better term. Okay.
Cool.
And then you asked me another
Roadblock.
question.
Yeah.
Roadblock as far as like right now, or
it could be any time. I mean, obviously, like Roadblock, you've already said was getting the right treatment, and then when you figured out what you needed, you got it. So we could leave it there, or if there's anything else that comes to mind.
I know I went round and round. I don't know how much we're supposed to talk about medication on this podcast, but I know I went round and round with medication as well, just trying to find the right one that worked and the milligrams and all that kind of stuff. And that was really hard for a long time. But now I found it, and I kind of have my maintenance med that I take once a day, and I think that that's going to be my thing for a long time. I don't see any. So I know that was really tough as well. But I know as far as a you know what, I would say a roadblock now would be time, which seems which I think you can probably blame a lot of things on time or lack thereof. But living in this small town where I live, it's hard. I have to travel to see the therapist that I need to see. And sometimes it's hard to say, okay, I'm going to have to do a 4-hour round trip to go see the counselor. And so I'm probably not in counseling as much as I should be due to just the distance. And like, I would always think of people, if they live in New York or they live in California or they live in Texas, it's like, you have treatment centers and you have therapists that are right there, and you just have to go to them, where in this small town in Michigan, it made it much more difficult to get to treatment.
I agree. I think it's a problem in the States for the smaller towns. I mean, as far as I'm aware, there are some actual states that I've heard that don't have OCD experts. I could be wrong on that.
I would say that's true.
Yeah, and obviously in my country, in many of the countries listening, it especially if you go east, there seems to be less OCD specialists in the terms of ERP. They may be OCD specialists in other therapies that they believe in, but as far as gold standard of what our research shows, I don't think there's a great deal. But I mean, that is changing, and with more and more people are learning all the time, clinicians that is, on how to use ERP, but also the rise in just the internet has made anyone can access therapists any therapists that are willing to work over Skype or whatever teletherapy service, they can now get access to those. So I mean, that's the good thing. So it is breaking down those, but obviously if you can, you want to be face to face with someone.
Sure.
Which is the kind of trade-off, I guess.
Well, and just the advancement. I mean, you're talking about technology. I mean, the advancement of the technology from, like, I remember when I was in Houston in 2010, Skype was like you had to know all the. It wasn't simple like it is now. You know what I mean? Like, and just all these advancements that have happened, like you were saying, like you can call somebody on the phone for therapy, or you could do a Skype therapy and all that kind of stuff. Going to conferences, and it's getting way better than it used to be, which is awesome. And just as it increases, I think it's going to get better yet.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And obviously there's also apps like the No OCD app, which is a great aid for anyone who doesn't have treatment, but also anyone who does have treatment, the therapist can use it with you to really track and manage exposures. That wasn't an advert for them, by the way. I just I like what they're trying to achieve.
Cool guy though.
Oh yeah, Stephen, he's great. Okay, so yeah, so obviously you have kids, as you mentioned.
I do.
And like I said to you before starting the show, parenting, I'm not a parent yet, but I have no doubt it's hard. And then when you have OCD alongside that, I'm sure it gets even harder. So obviously, I guess not focusing so much of when you're at your worst, because obviously the advice is get treatment. But
Yes.
But after you've had the treatment, is there any kind of, I guess, advice or words of wisdom you can pass to parents who have OCD on how to be a parent, I guess?
I think, and this might not just be OCD advice. I think this is just parenting advice in general, and it just goes along with kind of the whole mindfulness piece. Is the idea of just being in the moment. You know, I mean, if you're spending time with your kids and you're engaged with them and what they're doing, because that's inevitably what they want is your time. You know, and so many times we have so much stuff going on in our heads, and everything's so busy. You know, I got to pay the bills, and I got to go to work, and I got to do this, and I got to do that, and then like I have a 12-year-old, and she comes up to me with a computer and is like, "Oh, well, look at the shoes that I just custom designed on Vans.com. They're awesome." You know, and it's like being able to compartmentalize and be like, "All right, you know, I might be doing whatever I'm doing, but I need to be able to stop that for a minute and just engage in this moment." Because it's so simple to be like, all right, yeah, I'll get to that later. I'll get to that later. And you're not going to get to that later.
No.
You know what I mean? So giving them the gift of time, I think, is really important. And just not only the time, but the quality time as far as being engaged and being present with what's going on, you know, and that comes right along with the OCD treatment, because if you're checking, or if you're constantly washing your hands, or if you're doing compulsions, or you're not engaged in the moments for whatever reason, whether it is OCD related or not, then you're not there, and you want to be there, and they want you to be there. And
no, I think that's great advice. Yeah, I think we as thinking about, I'm sure every kid and every adult thinking back to their childhood either appreciated the mindful parenting or wish they had more mindful parenting.
Right.
Because that gift of time and attention, ultimately kids want to know they're loved, and that's one key way of doing it.
Mm-hmm. And probably the other thing, which is funny, my having OCD, I mean, I'm always constantly like watching my kids and like, trying to see, are they anxious, or are they, do they have OCD, or did they do this because of a lot of times I feel like because I have OCD, I'm like diagnosing other people having OCD, watching my kids or my family, and it's not really my job to do that. I mean, you want to be aware, and you want to pay attention to them, and my kids, they have some anxiety, with like most kids do, and I feel like the path that I've had and the treatment that I've had has been helpful to them, because I understand a lot of what they're going through. Yeah. My oldest daughter is in the marching band, and she plays snare drum in the marching band, and it's a pretty intense marching band, and she's really good, and she practices really hard. But whenever they have marching band practice in the evenings, it makes her anxious, and it's a little upsetting to her. And yesterday she had marching band practice last night, and she said to me, and it started at 6:00, and she said, "Gosh, 6:00 comes quick." And I said, "Yeah, especially if you wake up in the morning and you're already worrying about it all day until 6:00, and she looked at me like, kind of like, how do you know that? And I was like, and I said, because I do that. And I've done that before. I've been nervous or anxious or upset about something, and I've kind of given my whole day into it because I'm ruminating about, oh, this is going to happen at this time. And, and I said, it's okay to be upset and to be anxious about it, but don't give it your whole day. Do what you got to do. And then, at 5:45, then start getting anxious or getting worried about it, because 6 o'clock's going to come no matter what. Don't let it happen all day. And that was something I remember in treatment, learning about that. They taught me about worry time. I don't know if you've ever.
Yeah, I have, yeah.
It's so phenomenal, right? Because I mean, it's those thoughts that are constantly going to sit in your head all day long. And so then you say, okay, you know what? No, now's not the time to worry about it. From 6:30 to 7 o'clock tonight, I am going to worry about X, Y, and Z. Other than that, I'm going to take this thought, I'm going to set it aside, I'm going to let it be there. And so, and we've talked in our family about that. And I just think that's so powerful, because we'll just ruminate and worry all day long. And anticipation is much worse than participation. It just like, it's coming. When it gets there, then you can, deal with whatever it is. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. I try and do that now with things like just put it aside and be like, I'll worry about it when I have to deal with it. Because until then, it's just going to ruin my day, week, or month.
Right. I mean, you could be all cliche about it and be like, well, you can cross that bridge when you come to it, which is basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
If you're worried about something that's going to happen tonight, that's fine. Well, I mean, just like today, like I was anxious about coming on your podcast, and I could have woke up and I could have milled around the house and, laid around and been like, got this podcast at 3:30, and I just got up and I hit the day head on, and I was like, no, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. And then at 3:10, when it's time for Stuart to call, then I could be a little anxious about it, but I'm still going to do it.
Yeah.
And I guess, and that's the thing with OCD in general. I mean, that's the idea with the ERP, is that you're just hitting those fears head on. And yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to be hard, and it's going to be something that you might not want to do, but it's something that you need to do. Mm-hmm. And when we get done with this interview, I'm going to feel great about it. I love it. I'm so glad that we're doing this. I mean, I was a little uncomfortable about it, but it's happening now. And it seems like that happens a lot of the things in people's lives. I mean, whatever you're anxious, you're uncomfortable about it, but you face that fear, and then you did it, and then you can build upon that confidence.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love it. And it's like in acceptance commitment therapy, they talk about living according to your values, even if you're anxious, worried, scared, whatever.
Right.
And that's what you did today. You may have been scared about the podcast, but you said, well, fitness is important to me. I got this race. I'm going to run. I'm going to swim. I'm going to do yoga because mindfulness is important. Mm-hmm. I'm going to walk the dogs because they need to be walked, etc. You didn't sit there in a ball in the corner and, you took action on that.
Well, and don't get me wrong. I've spent plenty. Yeah. I've spent plenty of days in a ball in a corner. I definitely don't want to be.
I didn't want to stigmatize anyone.
Pinnacle of health here or anything like that. I mean, I get it. We all have really tough days.
Absolutely,
there's no doubt about that.
It's not letting those tough days become tough months or years.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, you're right. It's okay to have days or even weeks here and there, right? It's natural, it's human, but
sure.
Yeah. All right, cool. So tell us about Run OCD, where the name comes from, because some people may not pick up on it, and why you started it.
Sure. So I guess the caveat about Run OCD is really that I haven't been doing a lot with Run OCD for the last couple of years, and part of me, there's this level of failure about Run OCD that I feel, because we haven't been doing a lot of stuff. But yet, when it was up and running and we were doing a lot, there was a lot of great things that came out of it. And a good friend of mine said to me, and I love this. They said, just because you light the torch doesn't mean that you have to carry it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I feel about that. So Run OCD was just basically this idea that I had, and it all stemmed out of having starting my support group. So I came home from Houston OCD program with this idea that I need to start my own support group, and I couldn't figure out how I was going to do it. Like would I go down to the library and just put a sign on the bulletin board that says OCD support group tomorrow, everybody come on out, 7:00. If you have OCD, we'll see you there. And I was like, no one's going to show up. Right.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, we need to have an event. We need to have something that's like fun and brings people together. And so I found this ping pong table in the newspaper, and I already had a ping pong table in my basement, but I was going to pick up another ping pong table for whatever reason. And my wife called, and she's like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm going to buy a ping pong table. She said, oh, well, don't you have a ping pong table? I was like, yeah, but now we'll have 2 ping pong tables. And she said, well, what are you going to do with 2 ping pong tables? And just out of nowhere, I said, well, we're going to have a ping pong tournament to raise awareness for OCD. And then pretty much at that point, I had to do it because I just told my wife I was going to do it, and I just bought a ping pong table.
You were just trying to justify the purchase.
Right. I had to follow through. I mean, I had no other choice, right? So then I thought, all right, this will be kind of a cool idea. Mm-hmm. So I just, got some friends together and some people that I knew, and I love playing ping pong. I'm not good at it by any means. It's just a fun thing to do. And I thought, all right, we'll take a Saturday. We got a venue. We put some tables in there, and we called it Ping Pong for OCD, and we got some T-shirts. And I thought, well, this will be fun. And most people that will come because they want to play ping pong. It doesn't matter. Like a lot of times people do these 5K runs, and, you run for Alzheimer's or you run for diabetes, and people go because they're runners, not so much because, there's a certain group of people that are supporting the cause, but there's a lot of folks that just come because they want to run. Yeah. And I thought, well, we'll pretty much market this to ping pong players, people that will just want to come and have a good time on a Saturday. And so I had, at the tournament, I had a table in the corner that had like some literature and some books about OCD, and I had a sign-up sheet on there. And I didn't make a big deal, but I didn't say anything about it. I mean, the whole day was just about having fun, playing ping pong. We had music, we had food. It was a super fun day. And we called it Ping Pong for OCD, but it wasn't like the focus wasn't OCD. But the cool part about that day was the people that needed to, that saw the end of that line, like not the ping pong, but the OCD piece, found the table that had the books and had the literature and found the sign-up sheet. And from that event, then we started our first support group because I had a list of people to call. I had some emails, I had some phone numbers, and so then I reached out to those people. And so from Ping Pong for OCD, it was pretty successful. We had a good time doing it. And then I brought Ping Pong for OCD to the International OCD Foundation, to the conferences, because the days are really fun at those conferences, but sometimes the evenings, they've done a really great job lately with their evening activities, but kind of back in the day, and early 2010, whenever, there wasn't a ton going on in the evenings. And so I thought, well, wouldn't this be fun? We have these big giant rooms that they have the talks in, but then they have them rented out for the entire weekend, but they don't use them at night. So what if we folded up all these chairs and we just brought in a bunch of ping pong tables, and we just kind of had some fun. And so we started doing that, which was really neat. And then this idea kind of started catching on, where someone contacted me and they wanted to do a Ping Pong for OCD tournament in their town. And so we just kind of started kind of moving and shaking and doing these tournaments all around. And so at some point, I'm a huge hip hop fan. I'm a big rap guy. And so I made a T-shirt, because like there's the Run DMC logo the old school rap group Run DMC, and instead of making it Run DMC, I put Run OCD on it. And so I originally was just doing it as just like a fun kind of a play on words t-shirt sort of thing. And then the idea of starting a nonprofit kind of jumped into my head, and I was like, all right, well, maybe what we're doing here is bigger than just ping pong, because I was doing some speaking, we were doing the ping pong stuff, we were running the support group, we were doing some advocacy, the energy was starting to build, people were starting to jump on board. And so I thought, okay, well, let's call this the umbrella, let's call it Run OCD. The idea being, it's bigger than just one event. It was kind of like, okay, Run OCD is the umbrella, and underneath Run OCD was speaking, was doing ping pong events, and so I had another friend who latched on the idea, and he was doing disc golf events. So he was doing DG for OCD, which was pretty neat. So, like I was doing ping pong, he was in Florida doing disc golf, but it was all under this one umbrella of Run OCD. And I really liked the logo. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
But I think, well, I don't know. I don't want to. So that was the idea. That's what happened with the Run OCD.
Yeah. No, I love it, and especially the ping pong idea. Maybe we'll see another one day. If you ever come to the UK, we'll make it happen here.
I would love to. And there was a time in my life where the idea being like I was home from treatment, I was doing better. I was feeling good. I was getting involved. I was giving back. And it was this whole, like Jeff Bell does a lot with this too, with the advocacy that he does and different organizations that he's involved in. But it's helping yourself through helping others. And that felt really good. Like I kind of established myself as the face of OCD in my community, and I was really putting myself out there. I was on TV, I was doing radio, and I'm not bragging by any means, but I was just, my phone was ringing, people were calling me, and I was like, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that, someone else had this. I didn't know that there was all this help out there, so I kind of established myself as like a, I don't know, a consultant or something. Like people would call me and then I would guide them in the right direction. I would send them to the IOCDF. I kind of knew who the counselors were that you wanted to see and who the counselors weren't. And, we were running the support group. And so it was a lot, there was a lot going on, and it felt really good to be involved. When I first got back from the Houston OCD program, I was involved in a band and I was playing some music. And so I wrote a song kind of about my path with OCD. And I gave some shout outs to the Houston OCD program and some different people. The song was called Breaking the Symmetry. And so then we kind of had a musical piece to the organization as well, which was fun to do all that. But I think what happened is I tried to have it be too big, too fast. Like I thought this is what I was going to do for the rest of my life. Like I was like, I have found it. Yeah. I'm going to get an RV. I'm going to get a trailer. We're going to fill it with ping pong tables. I'm going to travel all over the United States. We're going to go to community centers. We're going to go to schools. We're going to put on ping pong for OCD events. We're going to raise awareness for OCD. This was like going to be it. Yeah. And it didn't quite work out that way. And so when it didn't work out that way, I think I got a little disappointed, and then it just, I don't want to say it's done, but it's definitely at a low right now, and I'm not quite sure, what's going to end up happening.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for being so honest. I can definitely relate to that. I think it's definitely, I know what you mean. When it's going well, you just want to do more and more and more, but then right. you run the risk of burnout and worsening your own mental health, and then
And
Yeah.
I really think that's what happened. I had gotten OCD about my OCD advocacy,
Yeah.
and it was kind of a monofocus for me, and I was pretty much getting back into the same spot that I had been with my family and with my friends, where I wasn't there. And the reason being that I wasn't there wasn't because I was sick and unhealthy and, on a couch covered in a sleeping bag, non-functional. It
Hmm.
was because I was so mono focused on ping pong tournaments and speaking and helping others and spending hours on the phone talking to people that called me and needed help, or sending emails, or just doing doing a ton of advocacy work, which felt really good and it was awesome, but at the cost of, again, time with my family, time with my wife, time with my kids, financially, because I was traveling. I mean, you probably have this too, where
Yeah.
you want to go. Someone invites you to go somewhere,
You want to
and,
do
"Oh,
it, yeah.
Stuart, we want you to be here," and you want to go. So then you're spending money and time and resources, and it's hard to know, when had the pendulum swung to now it's again detrimental, not a positive impact on, which is what the idea is and what it should be.
Yeah.
So that's been a tough piece of the puzzle, and I guess that's something I would say to all advocates, or anybody who's trying to get something started or trying to get a nonprofit going. I mean, there's just a ton of really great stuff out there, and the idea of helping yourself by helping others is important, but you just want to be careful to not get too deep into it. And I think that's what happened to me. And so I didn't know what else to do but just kind of put the brakes on and step back. And then, I'm sort of in a reevaluation
Yeah.
phase. I mean, that's why I didn't go to the conference last year. I needed to do a total, like, break, kind of draw a line in the sand. Like, all right, we did what we needed to do, what we could do at this point, but for personal reasons and family and everything, I just kind of had to shut the whole thing down and say, okay, time out, hold on, what are we doing here? What's the real reason why we're doing what we're doing? And it needs to be helpful as a whole, not only to other people but to myself as well. And I think my own OCD journey was taking a back seat to all the advocacy work that I was doing for other people, and that was against the whole reason why it started in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I think that's sound advice for anyone doing advocacy or wanting to do it. But also, I think generally anyone, just like anyone who's creating even a for-profit business that has nothing to do
Sure,
with OCD,
exactly.
you can work every hour of the day, but what's the point in getting success or money if you're missing the whole point, which is to live in the moment and to enjoy the people you have around you now, or whatever it is. Obviously, you've got to work hard to achieve things, but there's a
Sure.
balance, right? And I think it's easy to forget that, especially if you're OCD minded.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Balance. That's a good
Yeah.
word. I like that. Yeah, it was not a balanced uh, thing that I had going on in my life.
Yeah. No. Well, let's see where, the next few years takes you.
Uh-huh.
And we can
Yeah.
always do another episode on it if it
Yeah.
kicks
I
off
mean,
again.
it's all right there. I have all these big tubs in my basement of all, the infrastructure that I would need to,
Yeah.
get something else going. I really enjoyed it. I loved it. Um,
Yeah.
what it's going to be or what it will be, I'm not quite sure yet.
Yeah.
But like I said, there was a time where I felt like I had failed, like Run OCD had failed, and I've gotten to the point where I don't think that's true.
No.
I think that it was really cool and it was really helpful, and there was a lot going on when it was going, and I would like to think that it inspired some people to do some other things that they're doing at this point, and it will, what it will be is we'll see what happens next. I don't know.
No, that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah, and like I said, the offer's there. If you ever want to come to the UK, we can absolutely run one together.
That'd be fun.
And
I would love it.
In London, we have the brand's called Bounce, and basically it's a bar with ping pong tables everywhere. So you could literally rent out one of those. That way you wouldn't need any tables or anything.
It's so cool. And that's what we did with Chrissy Hodges in Colorado. There's a place called, I think it was called Spin or Ace or something. It was the same idea.
Yeah.
So it was super simple. We came in and we held our event right there at the ping pong bar, basically. Oh, nice. Because when you run a ping pong tournament, there's a lot of ping pong's tables aren't small. No. So there's a little bit of light, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot to it. Yeah. So okay, all right. Well, I'll take you up on that. That sounds great. I want to bring my family overseas anyway, so we'll come.
Absolutely, man. Let me know.
Okay.
All right. So you've got a billboard in Michigan, either in your town or in say Detroit or somewhere. What do you want written on that billboard for everyone to see?
That billboard says, "Live in the moment."
Nice. Love it. And so if you could pick up the phone and call the 20-year-old Kevin, what would you tell him?
20-year-old Kevin, I would tell him to move out of the house. I lived with my parents for too long. I needed to get out, and I needed to experience some life sooner, I think. Yeah, I mean, that's what I know that doesn't really say much about, OCD in general, but I think I needed to, I grew up slow, and I think I could have grown up a little bit faster, and that would have been better for me.
Yeah. No, good advice. And is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you wish you could have shared today?
I think probably the biggest thing that I would want to say to, regarding OCD is the idea that it's hard and it sucks, and there's, it's going to hit all the things that you love and try to take away everything that is valuable and that is important to you, but it is treatable, very much so, and there's tons of resources and there's tons of people out there that are willing to help you and that are able to help you, and it's worth it. Yeah. Putting that work in, putting that time in, doing your ERP, reading your workbooks and going to see your counselor and changing your sleep schedule and doing your exercises, and I mean all of those things that help you get better, it is so worth it, because when you're able to manage your OCD and you're able to live your life kind of in a management, because it's not going away, right? You're going to have it forever. But when you're able to manage and function, life's phenomenal. It really is, and everybody should be able to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. All right, well, thank you for your time today. I deeply appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
Yeah, man, thank you so much.
So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Kevin. And a quick disclaimer, this podcast is not therapy. It is not a replacement for therapy. Please seek treatment from a trained professional. All show notes, everything mentioned will be at theocdstories.com. And until we speak, take care.